Have you ever felt just completely dominated by your own thoughts?
Mm. And that feeling.
Like there's this nonstop conversation happening inside your head,
Yeah, a constant stream.
and it's always like pulling you into the past, maybe with regrets or, shooting you off into the future with all these worries and anxieties.
Totally. It's exhausting.
It really is. It's that feeling of being, well, mentally trapped, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like you just can't find any quiet or peace no matter what's actually happening around you.
It's such a common human experience, I think.
I think so many of us recognize that feeling.
Yeah.
Well, today we're doing a deep dive into a body of work that really confronts this exact thing head on.
Right.
We're exploring the transformative teachings of Eckhart Tolle, specifically from his hugely influential book, The Power of Now, A Guide to Spiritual Enlightenment.
A classic in this field.
Definitely. And our source material for this dive, it comes from some selected excerpts, actually from the Arabic translation of this really powerful book.
Interesting. So we're getting that perspective, too.
Exactly. And our mission today, it's pretty clear. We want to go beyond just, summarizing.
Mm-hmm.
We really want to unpack the most important ideas from these pages. Try to understand what it genuinely means to live in the now.
To actually inhabit it.
Yes. And see how these insights might offer, a practical path towards more inner freedom, maybe some lasting peace in your own life.
Sounds good. Where do we start?
Okay, let's unpack this. The source material, it really doesn't shy away from identifying what it sees as the root cause of so much human suffering.
No, it doesn't.
And it points directly, really, at our relationship with our own mind.
Exactly. The core problem, as it's laid out in these excerpts, it really stems from our deep identification with thinking, sumus as it's termed there.
Okay, thinking itself.
Well, yeah, but it's crucial to get this distinction. It's not about stopping thinking altogether. Obviously, thinking is a necessary tool, a function.
Right, we need to think.
Of course. The issue arises when that thinking becomes compulsive, when it's just this involuntary stream that completely takes over our consciousness.
Takes over.
To the point where we actually believe we are our thoughts. We lose ourselves in the stream.
Ah, I see. So it's the identification with the thoughts.
Precisely. The source uses a really powerful analogy here. The mind, which was meant to be this useful tool for us to use, has effectively become the master. It's running the show, dictating our whole experience of reality.
Wow.
In this incessant identified thinking, this is what gives rise to what the source calls the false self, or kasek, the ego.
The ego, we hear that term a lot.
We do. And here it's described not as like a tangible thing you can point to. It's purely a mental construct, an illusion built entirely out of thought forms, out of identification with those thoughts.
It's an illusion.
And it has these very specific characteristics drawn directly from these patterns of compulsive thinking. For instance, it constantly lives through comparison.
Comparing yourself to others.
To others, or even to some internal impossible standard, always measuring, which, leads straight to feelings of inadequacy or sometimes superiority, but always based on comparison.
Right.
It also thrives on judgment, constantly labeling everything and everyone, including ourselves, of course, as good or bad, right or wrong. It needs to categorize.
Puts things in boxes.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
its energy, its fuel, comes from craving, this perpetual desire for something that isn't here right now. Always looking to the next moment, the next thing, the next achievement, for some kind of fulfillment that never quite lasts.
If only I had X feeling.
That's it. And fundamentally, underneath a lot of this, it's steeped in fear.
Fear.
Yeah, fear of loss, fear of not getting what it craves, fear of not being enough, fear of the future, fear of the past catching up. It's pervasive.
Okay, so comparison, judgment, craving, fear.
And critically, the ego is fixated on time, psychological time.
What do you mean by psychological time?
It means it exists primarily in the past through memories, regrets, old stories, grievances, or in the future through anticipation, worry, planning, expectations.
So not here, not now.
It has almost no capacity to just be in the present moment, because the simple reality of this moment is actually where the ego's illusion of being this separate, time-bound self starts to, dissolve.
It can't survive the now.
Not really. It needs the past for its identity. This happened to me. And the future for its promise of fulfillment or fear. This might happen. Without them, it loses its structure.
Wow. Okay, so if this ego, this false self, created by getting lost in thoughts, is constantly swinging between past and future, always comparing and craving and worrying.
Right.
What are the actual, like, real-world consequences for us?
Right.
Our emotional state, our stress levels. What kind of suffering does this mind dominance actually lead to?
Oh, it leads directly to profound suffering, often relentless suffering. The source material is really unequivocal about this. When we are lost in that loop of psychological time, constantly rehashing the past, constantly projecting into the future, our dominant experience becomes one of constant worry, pervasive anxiety, just debilitating stress.
That sounds familiar.
Right. We get caught in these cycles of replaying past events, maybe dwelling on what went wrong, feeling guilt, feeling regret, just churning it over and over.
Ruminating.
Exactly. And at the same time, we're projecting ourselves into the future, anticipating problems, bracing for the worst case scenario, or maybe just living solely for some imagined future happiness that somehow never quite seems to arrive when the future becomes the present.
Because we're already projecting into the next future.
Precisely. The mind, when it's dominant like this, has this incredible tendency to just dwell on perceived problems and difficulties. It magnifies them.
It makes them bigger than they are.
Not only that, but often the mind actively creates problems where fundamentally none exist outside of its own interpretation or projection.
Creates them.
Through judgment, resistance, storytelling, the source presents this really striking idea. The mind is the problem.
The mind itself.
Not the mind as a tool, but the mind when it's running the show unconsciously. This isn't saying life doesn't have real challenges. Of course it does. Illness, loss, difficult situations, they are real.
Right.
But the suffering we experience around those challenges, that's often, maybe even mostly, the result of the mind's resistance to those challenges. Its narrative about them, its insistence on reliving past pain or anxiously anticipating future pain, all through this lens of psychological time.
So it's like an added layer on top of the actual event.
Exactly. It's the layer of mental and emotional baggage we pile onto the situation itself. And this continuous internal noise, this constant resistance to what is always analyzing, judging, wishing things were different right now.
Yeah.
That is precisely what blocks us from accessing the deep inherent peace, the stillness, even the joy that the source suggests are always available. Right here, within the present moment.
They're buried under all that mental commotion.
Completely buried. The sources even give this state a specific name, which is quite evocative. The drawn heirs of Pharaoh, which translates roughly to the madness of psychological time.
The madness of psychological time. Wow.
Yeah. It vividly captures this really pathological state of being so absorbed in the past, regret, guilt, resentment, or the future anxiety, endless anticipation, unrealistic hopes that you completely, utterly miss the reality of the only moment you were ever actually living, which is now.
You miss your life.
You literally miss your life as it unfolds. This psychological time, it feels incredibly real, incredibly compelling when you're caught in it. But the source insists it's a mental construct, a kind of prison built of thought that separates us from life itself.
The madness of psychological time, that phrase, it really hits home, doesn't it? When you think about how often you might be, physically sitting somewhere, maybe with family or at work, but your mind is just miles away, stuck on something that happened yesterday, or frantically trying to plan out every detail of tomorrow.
Totally absent.
Yeah, you're literally missing the experience you're having. Missing your life as it happens, second by second.
Absolutely. And, to really underscore the extent of this blindness that the mind creates when it's dominant, the source uses a very simple but incredibly profound analogy.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
It talks about a beggar, someone sitting on a large chest begging for scratch for years and years.
Oh, yeah.
But the whole time, they have no idea that the chest they're sitting on is actually filled with gold. Immense wealth. They just don't know it's there.
Wow. So they're sitting on the treasure, but still begging.
Exactly. And this is presented as a metaphor for our own situation, for the human condition, when identified with the ego.
How so?
We are identified with the ego, with this sense of lack, with the mental story of who we are that's the beggar identity. We're constantly seeking fulfillment, security, happiness somewhere else outside ourselves or in the future, like the beggar seeking scraps.
Right, looking out there.
Meanwhile, the true wealth, inner peace, real joy, the connection to what Tolle calls being, it's always present within us, right here, right now, like the treasure chest beneath the beggar.
It's already here.
It's already here. But because we're so identified with that mental construct, the beggar self, and so focused on psychological time, begging for that future handout or reliving past lacks.
We're blind to it.
We are completely blind to the immense richness that is actually our true nature, available only in this present moment.
That analogy, wow, that really brings it home. How incredibly close the potential for freedom is.
Right under our feet, so to speak.
Yeah, but how completely obscured it can become just by our own mental patterns, our own thinking. It really highlights the tragedy almost of living life like that beggar, constantly seeking outside when the treasure's within.
It's a powerful image.
And it seems this isn't just about, abstract thoughts. The Source also digs into the emotional side of this accumulated suffering. There's this concept of the pain body.
Yes, exactly. That's the crucial next layer that the material describes. Kusagyu, the pain body.
Okay, what is that exactly?
It's defined as the accumulated energy residue of all our past painful experiences. Things that weren't fully faced, accepted, and let go of at the time they happened.
So old emotional pain.
Old emotional pain, yes. Both personal from, childhood hurts, traumas, relationship pain, losses, failures, insults, whatever it might be, and potentially, the Source suggests, it can even draw from the collective human pain field, like echoes of suffering throughout history stored within us.
Collective pain, wow.
Yeah, it's a deep concept, but essentially it's this dense energy field of unresolved negativity that gets stored within your body and your psyche, like an emotional archive of everything painful that hasn't been processed.
Okay, an energy field.
And the key insight here from the Source is that the pain body isn't just a collection of bad memories. It's presented as an energy entity. It has a kind of semi-autonomous life of its own within you.
An entity, that sounds a bit out there.
It can sound that way, but think of it energetically. Its fundamental drive, its nature, is to survive and perpetuate itself, like any life form, in a sense.
Okay, so how does it survive?
It does this by feeding. And what does it feed on? More pain. Energy of a similar frequency.
It feeds on suffering.
Exactly. It gets activated or wakes up when something happens in your present life that resonates energetically with the signature of its past pain.
Like a trigger?
Precisely. A seemingly small criticism today might trigger a massive emotional reaction, way out of proportion, because it taps into years of stored pain related to criticism or inadequacy.
Ah, I see. That makes sense.
Or sometimes it doesn't even need an external trigger. It can simply activate itself periodically, maybe when it needs to feed, releasing its stored negative energy in waves.
This comes up out of nowhere.
Feels like it. Manifesting as intense negative emotions, maybe deep sadness that descends for no apparent reason, sudden bursts of anger, pervasive fear, anxiety, even depression. When the pain body is active, it effectively hijacks your thinking and your behavior.
Hijacks them.
Yes. It colors your thoughts, making them intensely negative and often self-attacking or attacking others. And it drives you to unconsciously create situations or engage in interactions or behave in ways that will generate more of its preferred food, more suffering, more drama, more negativity.
So it makes you create the very thing it feeds on.
That's the core idea. It's unsettling to think about, for sure, but the Source is quite direct about this. The pain body wants to suffer, not you consciously, but this unconscious energy field operating within you. It needs negative emotions and experiences to survive and maintain its energetic form.
Thinking about it wanting to suffer. Gosh, that actually explains a lot, like why sometimes we might feel almost inexplicably pulled towards creating drama or picking a fight, or why certain negative emotional states seem to just take hold and have a life of their own, lasting long after whatever triggered them initially has passed.
It provides a framework for understanding those patterns, why we seem to sabotage ourselves sometimes or get stuck in loops of negativity.
Yeah. How does this pain body particularly show up and maybe wreak havoc in our relationships? You mentioned triggers.
Oh, relationships are unfortunately prime territory for the pain body to become active and feed. Absolutely.
Why is that?
Well, intimacy often brings up our deepest wounds and vulnerabilities, right? So the pain body gets triggered very easily in close relationships. It fuels conflict by making us hypersensitive, highly reactive.
Overreacting.
Big time. It causes us to project our past pain, our old hurts, our unmet childhood needs, our unresolved emotional issues directly onto our partners. They become the screen for our old movies.
Ouch.
Yeah. So, for instance, maybe a partner makes an innocent comment or is slightly withdrawn, and it activates an old fear of abandonment stored deep in your pain body. The reaction that follows may be anger, neediness, accusation. It's huge, and it often has very little to do with the actual present moment interaction. It's the past pain pain erupting.
And the partner reacts to that reaction.
Exactly. And then their pain body might get triggered, and you're off to the races. A cycle of reactivity and suffering. The source even describes relationships that are heavily influenced by the pain body as potentially becoming addictive. Not in a healthy way, of course.
Addictive.
Addictive to the emotional drama, the intensity of the conflict, the ups and downs, the making up. It creates a kind of energetic charge that the pain body thrives on.
The intensity feels like life.
It can be mistaken for passion or deep connection, but it's often just the friction of pain bodies rubbing against each other. The source suggests that many, maybe most recurring relationship problems, the same arguments happening over and over, the destructive patterns, aren't necessarily due to fundamental incompatibility between the people. They often stem from the unconscious interplay between the activated ego patterns and the activated pain bodies of the individuals involved. One person's pain body triggers the others, and it creates this downward spiral that can be incredibly difficult to break free from without conscious awareness.
I think. Gosh, anyone who's been in a long-term relationship or even just observed their own family dynamics closely can instantly recognize what you're describing. Those sudden explosions of emotion that seem to come from nowhere, those arguments that feel completely irrational and just spiral out of control, that feeling of being drawn back into the same negative patterns again and again.
It resonates, doesn't it?
It really does. Thinking of it as this accumulated pain energy seeking to perpetuate itself, wow, it adds a completely new layer of understanding, maybe even compassion, to why relationships can be so difficult sometimes.
It shifts the perspective from blame to awareness.
Yeah. Okay, so if the core human predicament, as Tolle lays it out here, is being trapped by this compulsive thinking mind identified with this false ego self and burdened by this historical pain body, how do we find release? How do we get out? The title of the book points towards the answer being in the now.
Exactly.
So what is this power of now, and how on earth does just being in the now counteract these incredibly powerful internal forces like the ego and the pain body?
Precisely. That's the heart of it. The fundamental core teaching and the solution offered throughout the source material is the present moment. The now.
The now.
The source material emphasizes this over and over and over again. The now is the only reality that ever truly exists.
The only reality.
Think about it. The past, it's gone. It exists only as memory traces in your mind. Right now, it's a mental echo.
Okay.
In the future, it hasn't happened yet. It exists only as imagination, as projection, as anticipation in your mind right now.
So both are just thoughts happening now.
Exactly. They are ultimately concepts in the mind, not reality itself. Life, everything that is real, everything that truly happens, unfolds exclusively in this single, ever-present, eternal moment. The now.
Wow. Okay. The only place life happens.
And this present moment, it's also described as the gateway, the portal, to being.
Being. What's being?
Being is presented as the deeper dimension of life, the timeless, formless consciousness that underlies all of existence, all form. The very isness of life. And the key to accessing this dimension, the key to stepping out of the dominance of the mind, out of psychological time, and into reality itself is presence.
Presence.
Presence. Yeah. And it's crucial to understand, presence is not an intellectual idea about the present moment. It's not thinking, I should be present now.
Right.
It is a state of conscious awareness, an alert, awakened attention that is intensely focused on this moment, right here, right now, free from the mind's constant noise, and free from the gravitational pull of psychological time of past and future. It's being here, fully.
Okay, being fully here. But how does simply being present, just being aware of this, actually have the power to dissolve something seemingly so ingrained as identifying with the ego, or something as heavy and, seemingly solid as this pain body energy? It feels almost passive compared to how powerful those forces sound.
It's very counterintuitive for the thinking mind, isn't it? Because the mind always thinks in terms of effort, struggle, fighting against things.
Yeah, like you have to battle the ego.
Right. But presence is described as incredibly powerful precisely because it is not an action of the mind or the ego. It's a state of being that actually transcends them. It operates on a different level. Presence is the direct antidote to the mind's dominance. Think about it. When you bring your conscious attention fully into the fruit, Now, maybe focusing on your breath or the sensations in your body or the sounds around you.
Uh-huh.
What happens to that incessant stream of compulsive thinking? It naturally slows down. It might even stop completely for moments because your awareness is no longer fueling it.
You're not lost in the thoughts anymore.
Exactly. Your awareness shifts. Instead of being identified with the thoughts lost in the stream, you become the observer of the thoughts. You simply notice them arise and pass.
Ah, the witness.
That's the beginning of liberation, the moment you realize, I am not the voice in my head. I am the awareness behind the voice. That's presence emerging.
Okay, and how does that affect the pain body?
For the pain body, presence is like kryptonite. It's something it fundamentally cannot withstand for long.
What?
Because the pain body thrives in the darkness of unconsciousness, of unawareness. It feeds on your unconscious reactions, on your identification with its negativity. It needs you to be lost in its drama, lost in time-bound thinking about past hurts.
Okay.
Conscious awareness, the light of presence, is inimical to its very nature. It exposes it. The Source uses strong language, saying the pain body is actually afraid of the light of presence.
Afraid, an energy field.
Metaphorically, yes. It means presence dissolves it. You don't actually need to fight the pain body or analyze it endlessly or try to actively get rid of it. According to Tolle, you simply need to bring the light of your conscious attention to it.
Oh.
When you feel that familiar surge of negative emotion, that dense energy in your body, instead of reacting unconsciously or getting lost in the story the mind tells about it, you just turn your attention towards it. You feel it fully. You allow it to be there in the space of your awareness without judgment.
Just watch it. Feel it.
Yes. You bring presence to the discomfort, to the emotion, to the energy field itself. And in the presence of that calm, non-reactive awareness, its energy begins to dissipate and dissolve because its food source, which is your unconscious reaction and your identification with the suffering, has been removed. Presence cuts off its fuel supply.
So presence starves it out, in a way.
That's a good way to put it. The analogy used often is that problems, meaning the suffering about problems, cannot survive in the light of the now.
Okay, explain that a bit more. The external challenge might still be there, right?
Absolutely. Presence doesn't necessarily make the flat tire disappear or the difficult boss change overnight. External challenges are part of life. But what dissolves is the layer of suffering around the challenge. The mental anguish, the emotional turmoil, the resistance, the story that we add to the situation through getting lost in psychological time and unconscious reactions.
The madness part.
Exactly. Presence dissolves that madness. It brings a sense of spaciousness, a stillness, a clarity into the situation. It allows you to perceive what's actually happening more accurately without the distortion of past conditioning or future fear. And from that calmer, clearer space, you can respond much more effectively, much more intelligently, rather than just reacting blindly from fear or anger or the pain body's script.
So the suffering about the problem dissolves, leaving just the practical situation to be dealt with.
Precisely. You deal with the what is without the added burden of internal resistance and negativity.
That makes a huge amount of sense. It's not about changing the world outside first. It's about changing our internal state. But, okay, this still sounds maybe simple, but not easy. How do we actually do this? How do we access this state of presence? How do we cultivate it, especially when life is busy and stressful and the mind is racing? What are the practical steps?
That's the crucial practical question, absolutely. And the source material outlines several key practices, several doorways into presence. One really fundamental approach is unicel observing the thinker.
Observing the thinker. We touched on that.
Yes. This is often presented as the first essential step in disidentifying from your mind. It simply involves becoming the silent witness to your own thoughts.
How does that work in practice? Like, right now?
Well, just notice the thoughts going through your head. Maybe there's a judgment, a worry, a memory, a plan. Don't try to stop them. Don't analyze them. Don't judge yourself for having them. Just notice them.
Just watch them float by.
Exactly, like watching clouds drift across the sky. You simply observe the thought as it appears in your consciousness. And in that moment of observation, you recognize, that's just a thought. That's a mental event. It's not the totality of who I am. It's not necessarily the absolute truth.
Creating some distance.
Precisely. The power is in that simple act of stepping back, of being the awareness behind the thinking rather than being completely swept away by the thinking. It creates a space. And in that space between you, the awareness and the thought, that is presence.
Okay. It takes conscious effort, though, right?
Yeah.
Because the pull to get lost in thought is so strong.
Yeah. It definitely requires conscious attention, especially initially. The habit of identification is deeply ingrained. But like any skill, The more you practice just noticing your thoughts non-judgmentally, the stronger that witnessing awareness becomes.
Okay, observing the thinker. What else?
Another really powerful practice suggested is Sagulasho, which means listening to the silence or the space.
Listening to silence. But what if it's noisy?
That's the beauty of it. It's not necessarily about finding a perfectly silent place, although that can help. It's about shifting your attention. When there's noise, listen also to the silence underneath the sounds, or the gaps between the sounds, the stillness that allows the sound to be heard.
Ah, the background.
Yes. Or when you look at objects in a room, become aware not just of the objects, but of the space around them, the space between them, the emptiness that allows the forms to exist.
Focusing on the space.
The source emphasizes that this silence, this space, isn't just the absence of noise or things. It's described as something deeper, almost like the non-manifested dimension itself, the ground of being. And by consciously tuning into outer silence or outer space, you naturally start to connect with the inner stillness and spaciousness within yourself.
Okay.
This practice cultivates what the source calls OSUS space consciousness. It's an awareness of the vast, empty, conscious container in which all the content of your life, your thoughts, your emotions, your perceptions, the world itself, arises and dissolves. It helps shift your sense of identity from the content to the context to the awareness itself.
From the waves to the ocean.
Beautifully put, yes.
Okay, that's interesting. Observing thoughts, listening to silent space. What else?
A very direct and perhaps one of the most powerful practices described is Shinoshiza entering the inner body.
Entering the inner body. What does that mean?
It means bringing your conscious attention out of your head, out of incessant thinking, and directing it into the subtle feeling of aliveness within your physical body.
How do you do that?
You can start simply. Right now, can you feel the sense of energy or aliveness just in your hands? Without looking at them, just feel them from the inside.
Yeah, I think so. A kind of tingling. Warmth.
Exactly. Whatever you feel. It might be subtle at first. Then maybe try feeling the aliveness in your feet or in your abdomen. Then gradually expand that awareness until you can feel the entire body as a whole, as a single, vibrant energy field from within.
Feeling the life in the body.
Yes.
Yeah.
The source describes the body, when felt from the inside like this, as a direct doorway, a portal, directly into being, directly into the now.
Why is it so direct?
Because unlike your mind, which is always roaming in the past or future, your body is always unequivocally here in the present moment. You can't feel your body yesterday or tomorrow. You can only feel it now. So bringing awareness into the inner body instantly grounds you in the present.
Instant grounding.
Yes. And this practice is also described as highly effective for dissolving the pain body.
How does feeling the body help with the pain body?
Because you're bringing the light of conscious awareness directly into the physical area where the pain body's dense, contracted energy is often felt or stored. You're not engaging with the pain body's story in your head. This happened, that's why I feel bad. You're bypassing the mind and just feeling the raw energy directly. Allowing that energy to be seen by consciousness helps it to loosen its grip and dissipate. It shifts your awareness from the mental concept of my body to the direct felt experience of life pulsing within it.
Wow. Okay. Observing, listening to space, feeling the inner body. Any others?
Yes, there's a foundational practice, or perhaps more accurately, an attitude that underlies all of these, and it's crucial. It's into acceptance and surrender.
Surrender. That word can sound passive, like giving up.
Right, and the source is very careful to be precise about what it means here. Surrender, in this context, is not passive resignation. It's not weakness or just giving up on taking action in the world.
Okay, so what is it?
It is conscious, intelligent acceptance of what is. It means accepting the reality of this present moment exactly as it is without internally arguing with it, resisting it, or wishing it were different.
Saying yes to whatever's happening now.
Yes. A deep inner yes to the form this moment takes. Because resistance to fighting reality mentally is identified as the primary generator of psychological suffering. When you resist what is already happening, you create inner conflict, friction, and that manifests as negative emotion, anger, frustration, anxiety, despair.
Resistance creates the suffering.
Largely, yes. So surrender means dropping that inner resistance. If there is physical pain, you accept. Okay, pain is here now. If there is a difficult situation, you accept. This difficulty is here now. If you feel sadness, you accept. Sadness is present now.
But does that mean you just do nothing if the situation is bad?
Not at all. This is key. Surrender doesn't mean you can't or shouldn't take action to change the external situation if change is possible and appropriate, but the action arises from a different place. Action that arises from a place of non-resistance, from a clear acceptance of the current reality as your starting point, is far more intelligent, effective, and less stressful than action fueled by resistance, negativity, fear, or anger.
Can you give an example?
Sure, the classic one. You're stuck in heavy traffic, late for something important. Resistance sounds like, this shouldn't be happening, this is terrible, why me? You get angry, stressed, blood pressure rises, but the traffic doesn't change.
Right. Makes it worse, probably.
Exactly. Surrender in that moment would be, okay, I am stuck in traffic right now. This is the reality of this moment. You accept the isness of it. That acceptance immediately dissolves the suffering caused by the resistance. It brings a calm clarity. And from that place, you can then decide intelligently, okay, what action can I take? Can I call ahead? Can I find an alternate route? Or maybe I just need to relax and listen to some music. The action comes from presence, not panic.
So acceptance first, then action if needed.
Yes. Accepting what is allows you to respond wisely to what is.
Okay, those are incredibly concrete practices. Observing thoughts, tuning into silence or space, feeling the inner body's energy, and practicing this conscious acceptance, this surrender. It sounds like. Maybe you don't have to master all of them at once.
Not at all. It's more about experimenting. Seeing which doorway resonates most with you at any given time. Which practice helps you connect, even briefly, with that underlying sense of presence, that stillness beneath the mental noise.
Finding your own way in.
Exactly.
So, okay, if we actually begin to integrate these practices into our daily lives, maybe even just in small moments throughout the day, how does living more from the state of presence actually change things? How does it shift our day-to-day experience? And maybe crucially, how does it change our interactions and relationships with other people?
Oh, living from presence, even inconsistently at first, begins to shift everything profoundly.
How?
Well, for starters, those challenges and difficulties the mind previously loved to magnify into these huge, overwhelming problems, often deeply rooted in narratives about past failures or fears about the future. You know, they start to be seen more clearly for what they are. Simply situations that exist in the present moment. Situations to be dealt with, perhaps, but not these massive, personalized burdens that define you.
Takes the drama out of it.
It takes a lot of the unnecessary mental drama about the situation out of it. You're much less likely to get lost in the story, the blame, the worry. Instead, you're more able to perceive the situation clearly as it is and respond effectively right here in the now.
So more clarity.
Definitely more clarity, and consequently, much less stress and anxiety. There's a growing sense of inner peace that becomes less and less dependent on whether external circumstances are good or bad.
Peace, even when things are difficult.
Yes, because the peace comes from non-resistance to the moment, not from the moment itself being perfect according to the mind's demands. You also become more effective in your actions.
More effective.
Because your actions start arising from awareness, from presence, rather than from unconscious reaction, fear, or those ingrained, conditioned patterns from the past. You respond rather than react. And the suffering that you used to create through your reaction to life, through resistance, that begins to dissolve, bit by bit.
Okay, that sounds pretty transformative for daily life. What about relationships? You mentioned earlier they're often fertile ground for the ego and the pain body to cause trouble. How does presence transform those interactions?
Relationships are perhaps one of the areas where the shift can be most profound and maybe most needed.
Yeah.
When you start bringing presence into your interactions, you begin to move away from those unconscious egoic patterns that cause so much conflict and suffering, the need to be right, the blaming, the defensiveness, the manipulation, the projecting.
All that stuff.
All that stuff. Instead of reacting automatically from your conditioned mind, or worse, from your activated pain body, projecting all your past hurts onto the other person, trying to control them, demanding things from them based on your own unmet needs or fears.
Instead of that.
You are simply present with them. You are here, now, with this person.
What does that look like in practice? Being present with someone.
It means really listening. Listening not just to the words, but to the space between the words, to the emotion behind them. Listening without simultaneously formulating your reply or defense in your head.
That's hard.
It takes practice. It means responding when you do respond from a place of conscious awareness, from that stillness, rather than just firing back with an automatic, conditioned reaction.
So if your partner says or does something that normally would trigger your pain body.
With presence, you gain a crucial split second of awareness. You can actually feel the pain body energy starting to arise within you, that familiar clench, that surge of anger or fear. But because you are present, because you are the awareness, you don't have to automatically identify with it. You don't have to believe its story. You don't have to act it out unconsciously.
You can choose not to react.
You realize you have a choice. You can observe the energy, feel it, allow it to be there without letting it take you over and dictate your words or actions. And that simple act breaks the cycle. It stops the unconscious reaction and projection that fuels so much relationship conflict.
Wow, that alone could save so many arguments.
Absolutely. And the source suggests that bringing presence into relationships consistently opens the door to something much deeper. It opens the possibility of, well, of true love.
True love. How is that defined here?
It's described not as the ego's usual needy attachment, the I can't live without you, the craving for someone to complete you or make you happy. That's seen more as egoic wanting.
Okay.
True love, in this context, is seen as an emanation of being itself. It arises from presence. It is the presence of being flowing between people when the barriers of ego and pain body dissolve, even momentarily.
Love is being.
Yes. When you are present, you can see the other person more clearly, beyond the distorting veils of your own projections, judgments, and expectations. You connect with the being in them, underneath their personality and history. The drama, the conflict, the games that the ego and pain body feed on in relationships. They start to dissolve because their primary food source, which is unconsciousness, reaction, identification, is replaced by conscious awareness, by presence.
So it allows for a connection based more on acceptance.
Authenticity.
Exactly. Acceptance, authenticity, and the shared space of presence itself.
It really sounds like presence doesn't just, improve relationships. It fundamentally elevates them from something potentially fraught with conflict and ego battles to something potentially much more profound, much more authentic.
That's the potential held within presence, yes.
Okay, this deep dive, it feels like it's gone from really understanding the nature of our sort of internal struggle with the mind, the ego, the emotions, the pain body, to discovering this immense, almost hidden power within the present moment and exploring these really tangible ways to access it, observing thoughts, silence, the body, acceptance.
Or practical tools.
Right. And it seems like this path, it points beyond just, living a calmer, less stressful life, although that sounds pretty good in itself.
Definitely a good start.
Yeah. But it seems to hint at something deeper, a deeper truth about who we actually are beyond all the temporary fluctuations of our minds and emotions.
Yeah.
What does this source material say about our true identity? Who are we really beyond the ego?
That is the ultimate realization that this whole teaching points towards. The source makes it very clear. The ego, the seemingly solid self that's built purely from identifying with thinking, from our personal history, from past and future, is not who you fundamentally are.
It's not the real me.
It's a temporary form, a mental construct.
Yeah.
Useful in some ways for navigating the world, perhaps, but ultimately illusory as your core identity. Your true self, illusory, is not the thinking mind. It's not the emotional pain body. It's not your personality or your history.
So what is it?
It is described as being intimately connected to, or even identical with, being, and so consciousness. This formless, timeless dimension of pure awareness that underlies all forms, that animates everything. The source of life itself.
So my true self is consciousness, being.
That's the pointer. And enlightenment, Senesai, isn't presented as some superhuman achievement you have to strive for and attain in the distant future.
No.
No. It's described more as the recognition, the direct realization of this timeless, formless dimension already within you. And that recognition is only possible in the now, because that dimension is timeless. It's not in time.
You can only access it now.
Exactly. Enlightenment is essentially a fundamental shift in consciousness. From being primarily identified with the content and form of your life, your thoughts, your body, your circumstances, your personal story, to realizing yourself as the context, the conscious space, the formless awareness in which all of that content arises and dissolves, it's recognizing yourself as being, as the awareness itself.
Wow. That's a big shift.
It's the ultimate shift, according to Tolle.
And this connection to being, to this true self. Is that where real inner peace is found? Is that the natural state that's always there, just hidden beneath all the mental noise?
Exactly. Inner peace, as it's described in the source, is not the same as conditional happiness, feeling good because things are going your way according to the ego's preferences.
Right, that kind of happiness comes and goes.
It does. It's fleeting, dependent on external circumstances remaining favorable. Inner peace, however, is presented as a state of non-resistance to the present moment, a deep acceptance of what is. It's the peace that is found beneath the turbulent surface level of thought and emotion discovered in the stillness of presence.
So it's always accessible,
Yeah.
even when things are tough.
Yes. The source makes a clear distinction between happiness, which is often tied to outcomes and external events, and inner peace, which is described as a constant underlying state that becomes accessible through presence, regardless of the external challenges you might be facing. It's the natural state of being itself, which is inherently peaceful. That peace gets revealed when the mind's compulsive chatter quiets down, when the tight grip of psychological time loosens its hold, and when our habitual resistance to the reality of the now dissolves.
So it's not something you have to create or achieve.
It's something you uncover by letting go of what obscures it. And what obscures it primarily is our identification with the thinking mind and our resistance to the present moment. The peace, the stillness, is already there, always available, just waiting to be noticed underneath the noise.
Wow. Okay. This deep dive, it really has taken us on quite a journey, hasn't it?
It covers a lot of ground.
Yeah, starting from identifying that really widespread human challenge, just being lost in thought, caught in the grip of past pain, the pain body.
It's a common predicament.
Then discovering the profound, maybe deceptively simple power of the present moment
Yeah.
as the actual key to freedom.
The power of now itself.
And exploring these practical paths to actually cultivate presence, observing the thinker, listening to the silence, entering the inner body, practicing that conscious acceptance, surrender.
The how-to.
Right. And finally, seeing how this shift towards presence fundamentally transforms not just our daily experience, making it potentially more peaceful and effective, but also our relationships, and ultimately how it points us towards understanding our true identity as something much deeper than the ego, connecting us to that inherent inner peace.
It's a journey from mind identification to being realization.
Yeah. A movement from the sort of confines of the conceptual mind to the boundless space of conscious being. It's a lot to take in.
It is deep stuff.
As you, listening, reflect on everything we've explored today,
Yeah.
maybe just consider your own patterns. How often do you get lost in psychological time, in worry or regret? And maybe think about those rare moments in your life when you felt most fully alive, most truly present, most genuinely peaceful. What was happening in those moments? What was different?
That's a great reflection point, and maybe connecting this to the bigger picture. The source states so powerfully that suffering is essentially resistance to what is, resistance to the now.
Suffering is resistance.
Which leaves us with a really significant question to ponder, doesn't it, for each of us? If suffering is born of resisting the present moment, what would it actually feel like? What would it actually mean to fully and completely embrace the inner fruit? Now, exactly as it is, without any internal resistance, no matter what it contains, what would that be like?